Hello and welcome to Proto-Germanic Revivalistics. Continuing on the topic of word formation, today we'll look a little closer at compounding, that is forming new words by fusing more than one stem together. Compounds are prolific in the Germanic languages, but much less so in, for example, Lithuanian. Due to some commitments, it could take a little longer for me to record new videos this autumn, and this video is not as comprehensive as it perhaps could have been, but I still wanted to share something a little more practical and useful. As we've mentioned in passing before, English orthography isn't a role model when it comes to how to write compounds. Let's remind ourselves of our previous examples. While suboptimally written quite differently, the words dragonfly, role model and rose-tinted are all compounds. That is, we here have 3 phonological words and not 4 or 5. In, for example, Swedish, all compounds are written like dragonfly, that is, without any space or hyphen between the members, and this is also how we write compounds in Proto-Germanic. Another difference from English is that in our Proto-Germanic compounds, I also always mark primary and secondary stressed with the acute and grave accent marks, as I personally believe there are benefits to doing so. Please keep in mind that some compounds given in the following are back projections, without any claim to be reconstructible for Proto-Germanic proper. The latter is for us irrelevant, as we are doing revivalistics and not historical linguistics here. If we meet with a compound that perhaps is only attested once in just one Germanic language, say in Old High German, Norwegian or a Swedish dialect we've never heard of before, and we feel the need to use it, nothing should stop us from doing so. Likewise, nothing should keep us from coining new compounds either if we need to. However, I suspect most of us would prefer to look for a compound in an Old Germanic language first, or barring that a compound in a Modern Germanic language before we coin a new one. Compounds in Proto-Germanic were to my knowledge likely limited to 2 members. Examples of this can be our now perhaps familiar compounds Avisaxio, a noun meaning lizard, and yes, I am quite fond of lizards, and Ertakundas, an adjective meaning of earthly descent. We'll also add a few new ones to the list to make it more interesting, or less boring, depending on how you feel about the subject. These are Chrogyabaina, Kutenabagmas, and Skianawurmes. While rare, triple compounds are still attested in Old High German and Old Low German, and Old Low German is just another name for what is also called Old Saxon. Let's make a back projection of 3 Old High German examples I've scooped up from Carr, 1939. These are Wicharauki Brunstis, incense burning, literally sacred smoke burning, Wicharauki Bagmas, incense tree, literally sacred smoke tree, and Haslaksnotkerne, hazelnut kernel, literally hazelnut kernel. Multi-member compounds are quite handy, and I can't see why we for revived Proto-Germanic should limit ourselves to 2-member compounds. Most compounds spanning several lines of text, as can be encountered in classical Sanskrit, are hardly natural, but that didn't stop anyone in ancient India from coining them. Allowing multi-member compounds is also the reason why I talk about compounds in terms of the first member and the last member, instead of just the first and the second member. For the time being, I'm leaving out compounds of particles, because as I record this, I'm not certain to what extent we need to think of them as compounds rather than, say, prefixed adverbs. Regarding compound pronouns, they look somewhat more complicated, my notes leave a lot to be desired, and I'd like to spend more time on those to at least give me a chance to minimize the risk of saying something totally wonky about them. This leaves us with Proto-Germanic nominal compounds, where the permissible members were, as far as I'm currently aware of, nouns, adjectives, numerals, and at least the reflexive possessive pronominal adjective sinas, meaning his or her own. Proto-Germanic seems to not have had any compounds with verbs. Verb plus noun compounds, such as pickpocket, are still rare, and I at least don't believe they are productive in the Germanic languages, but I haven't double-checked that, so I'm not going to drink venom on it. But incidentally, this is also why I find the common interpretation of Loford on the tuner runestone unappealing, as it assumes a type of compound that would be the most unlikely to occur. The closest thing to a verb plus noun compound seem to be a few epithets in Old Norse, consisting of a participle plus noun, of which you can read a little bit more in Carr, 1939, on page 174. There is a good chance I've missed something here, so don't be shy to leave a comment if you have examples of something I've managed to overlook. Corrections will be made to any future version of this video, as I see no point in keeping up a video spreading misconceptions. One can classify compounds in a number of ways, and I totally would recommend looking through a few handbooks on morphology for a more detailed picture. I'm going to make it easy for us, and we'll just sort our compounds into co-ordinative, determinative, and exocentric compounds. A coordinative compound with the members A, B denotes A and B. A determinative or endocentric compound, AB, denotes an A kind of B. An exocentric compound, AB, denote a special kind of a semantic head outside of the compound. Coordinative compounds were likely unproductive already in Proto-Germanic, but there are some coordinative compounds attested which are either numerals or denote kinship pairs. And I just realized that I don't mark primary and secondary stressed on numerals. Never mind. Examples of coordinative compounds can be fimchtechun, 15, aithmasvechraniz, son-in-law and father-in-law, Sochtor fadurvianiz, nephew and uncle, Kasunofaderiz, son and father. And no, I'm not sure why there is what looks like a collective prefix on the latter in Old Old German. From my limited point of view, it looks somewhat superfluous. These few examples of kinship pairs stand in the plural, but since we're talking about exactly two individuals, we might want to use the dual here. That is, if we allow ourselves to project forward the expected dual endings from Proto-Indo-European to Proto-Germanic. If we do, then in this case we'll meet with Aithmasvechrane, Suchtur-Fadurviene, and Gasunofadere, as I believe e should be the expected nominative and accusative dual masculine and feminine consonant stem ending. And since I know you're asking yourself at this very moment, I believe the neutral dual ending would be e. There is also at least one, as I only have a note on one, collective form to a kinship pair, namely Sonofaderunge, the people accompanying son and father, which I at least think is a masculine singular end stem. Please let me know if I'm mistaken here. Something that does not seem to have occurred in Proto-Germanic are coordinative adjective plus adjective compounds. However, these have developed independently in the later Germanic languages and they can be quite handy. If we allow ourselves to make back projections of a few examples, these could be blevagelwas, blue and yellow, svarta huitas, black and white, and chauchathunus, tall and thin. Whether or not to use adjective plus adjective coordinative compounds is something you'll have to decide for yourself. I have to admit I like them. Examples of determinative or endocentric or attributive compounds can be, for example, aitraslange, adder, fechogernas, desirous of wealth, sinagernas, selfish, blevaraudas, bluish red, ainawigia, single combat. Exocentric compounds denote a semantic head outside of the compound itself. If we think of a tripod, then it's not a special kind of foot, it's something which has 3 feet. Examples of exocentric compounds can be manlausas, without men, friachalsas, free man, managafaldas, manifold, of many kinds, thrifots, tripod, triskelion, ainachandias, one-handed, erthakundas, of earthly descent or born on earth, castegodas, hospitable, and ainachlaupis, unmarried. Occasionally, a compound can be interpreted as either determinative or exocentric, for example, hundachafuth, head of a dog, as determinative, or snapdragon, which is a certain flower, as exocentric. Context will tell you which interpretation is the correct one. Another case of an ambiguous compound could be if you want to use a new name for Friday, and instead of Frigg as the first member, you'd want Frey or Freya. And yes, you can do whatever you want. If anyone says you can't, it's their problem, not yours. But in this case, it would unfortunately not be possible to tell by the compound if it's the day of Frey or the day of Freya that's meant. Both of these would namely turn out as Fraujadagas. To avoid this, I'd suggest instead using a phrase such as Fraujenisdagas or Fraujonisdagas, that is the day of Frey or Freya respectively. This leads us to our next chapter, namely the morphology of non-final members or the composition vowels. Non-final members of compounds appear, with some deviations, as undeclined stems. This is not the same thing as just tacking two nominative singulars onto each other by removing the space in between them, which is not that uncommon to see happening on the internet. On screen you can see a list of stems and their composition vowels, but I won't read it out aloud. First I should say that Carr, 1939, on page 275, instead of ur for R stems gives the composition vowel u. That would be ru in our list. This is judging from Gothic, brostro lubo, meaning brotherly love. I'm not going to go out on a limb and start sewing, and I will just say that I'm not certain. It looks like it was ur in our previous examples of coordinative compounds. Now we of course wonder if we are sitting with a noun with two different stems and we want to use it as a non-final member of a compound, which stem should we use? That is a really good question. Unfortunately, I don't have a confident answer. We can mention examples such as grumpthus, ground, with the genitive singular, grundaus, chafuth, head, with the genitive singular, chabuthiz, and ebanths, evening, with the genitive singular, aftundiz. And no, you might not use these particular paradigms, and that's perfectly okay, but I'll use them for the sake of the argument, or lack thereof. The daughter languages have to my knowledge leveled out their paradigms in favor of one or the other, and so far I just haven't found anything which would point to one way or the other regarding compounds. I thought I had, but now it seems that I hadn't. Sorry about that. But if you have, then as always I'd like to hear about it. Maybe we need to widen our horizon a bit and look at other ancient Indo-European languages. I don't know. Something we've not looked closer at is that the final members of Proto-Germanic compounds sometimes would change stem and thus be declined differently from the simplex, and you can see a few examples of this on screen now. Added to this would be that compound adjectives supposedly could change into E stems, or I stems, I'm still not sure how to say it. One can suspect that these changes were formally or semantically conditioned, but any governing rules or tendencies discernible in Proto-Germanic regarding this are, as I'm recording, not crystal to me. I found some, I read some, I just haven't spent enough time on it to write any usable notes on it. I'm not a fan of uncertainties, but then again perfect is the enemy of good, so sooner or later one will just have to settle for something. For now, however, I'm going to have to take a rain check on this, but it's a very interesting topic, or at least I think so you might want to keep it in the back of your head or write it up on a post-it. And if your own studies uncover something interesting before I return to this, I hope you'll share it on Discord with the rest of us. If you're still with me here at the end, that was it for today, and I hope you found something of what we've looked at to come in handy for when you are composing something of your own in Revive Proto-Germanic. Until next time, be well.